From Acura to Volvo, practically every luxury car brand in North America has decided that the future is all electric. But the way that different car companies are going about achieving that goal is quite different. Volvo is arguably pushing harder at the mission of emissions reduction and gasoline consumption reduction than any other car brand in North America, aside from the electric startups, of course. Because for 2023, Volvo's entire lineup in North America is at least a mild hybrid. Their sales of plug-in hybrid models are over 50% in some of their core markets, like the state of California, and definitely solidly high in the entire United States. In fact, when it comes to hybrids and plug-in hybrid sales, no car company out there can match Volvo's sales blend. Not Toyota, not Lexus. They're definitely not shifting as many hybrids in terms of sales, percentage of sales, as Volvo is. Today we're taking a look at the S60 sedan. This is the smallest sedan in their North American lineup, designed to compete with the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, the BMW 3 Series, also the Acura TLX, and the Audi A4. This model starts at $42,395 and will get you at least 30 miles per gallon. The rest of you might be wondering why we're talking about the S60 again, since I last looked at it 2 years ago and it hasn't had a full refresh since then. Well, there are a few reasons. We have a new C-Class, we have a new 3 Series, and Volvo doesn't go about changes the same way the Germans do. You might not already know this, but Volvo tends to march to a different drummer in a number of areas. The way they tune the drivetrain and the general suspension of the vehicle, but also the way they decide to release updates. Rather than bottling up changes and releasing them as a mid-cycle refresh every 3 years, Volvo tends to drip out changes year on year. So one year they might update the safety systems, one year they might give you a new grille, the next year they might give you a new infotainment system or a new engine under the hood. And that's pretty much what we've seen in the S60 since it launched in 2019. If something was not quite right for you back in 2019 when you decided to lease a BMW 3 Series or a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, you might want to give the 2023 S60 a look because some of those things may have changed over time. One of those things is the drivetrain. We again now find the mild hybrid system standard and a plug-in hybrid system with 455 horsepower and 31 miles per gallon. Definitely a solid alternative to the mid-level performance options from the Germans. With an overall length of 187.4 inches, the S60 is almost exactly the size of the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, about 2 inches longer than the 3 Series, but 7 inches shorter than the Acura TLX, although we get about the same kind of interior room as we find in that Acura. The TLX and the S60 both have transverse engine designs, so the engine is sitting long ways across the hood. But the S60 was designed only to accommodate a 4-cylinder engine, not a 6-cylinder engine like we find in the TLX. So as a result, the front overhang is definitely shorter than in the TLX, and Volvo has decided to give us a longer dash-to-axle ratio, giving this the long hood profile that you expect in a European luxury sedan. You can see the hood is definitely very long, just about as long as the hood that we find in a BMW 3 Series. That certainly gives this a more premium profile than we found in the previous generation S60. The downside to the long hood profile that we find really in every entry in this segment is rear seat legroom. We don't find quite as much as you might find in a more mainstream option that has a shorter hood but the same overall length. But legroom in the S60 is right in line with the rest. Volvo bumped the power under the hood substantially, but they did not bump the rubber. We have 235 40R19 tires all the way around, and a near 50-50 weight balance in the plug-in hybrid model. If you choose the Polestar Engineered trim, then the tires do get upsized to 245 with summer tires, so you'll certainly get more grip in that model, but it's also substantially more expensive. I am surprised that Volvo didn't go just one size category up on this, and maybe even further on the Polestar Engineered. They could have always given it just a minor fender flare to accommodate some wider tires, and that likely would have improved handling and braking scores. As you'd expect out of a European luxury sedan, nothing controversial is going on back here in terms of design, other than the fact that we get red turn signals rather than amber turn signals, although in the rest of the world, of course, they would be amber. We get very slim LED backup lights, an elegant taillight theme here. Kind of reminds me of either the number 3 or the letter E. Let me know what you think about that. The other thing that some folks might not like, especially in the higher horsepower model, is that we don't get any visible exhaust tips. Volvo recently decided that their vehicles shouldn't have exhaust tips, so that way everything would look the same, whether it was electric, plug-in hybrid, or gasoline. They wanted them all to have a very similar, clean look. And speaking of similar, this looks definitely an awful lot like the Volvo S90. Volvo definitely subscribes to that same sausage, different lengths philosophy when it comes to design. So S60, S90 look very similar, XC60, XC90, etc. They all look like scale models of one another, with certain exceptions like the Volvo C40. That definitely looks a bit different than this. When it comes to active safety and driver assistance tech, the S60 offers all of Volvo's latest gadgets. However, not all of them are standard. Adaptive cruise control, their aggressive lane centering software, and the heads-up display, those are optional on the S60. And if you want the latest in Volvo software and safety, then you want to wait until next year, because that's when we're going to get the new Volvo EX90, the first vehicle in North America with standard LiDAR sensors. They're actually going to have an extra safety sensor right up there just behind the windshield, and that's going to improve the autonomous braking software and the performance of basically all of those active safety systems. For the US market, Volvo offers two different drivetrains. The base engine is the mild hybrid setup. It produces 247 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque from a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo. That engine is mated to a 14 horsepower integrated starter generator unit. That's used to start and stop the engine, also give it some regenerative braking capability, but it will never drive the vehicle along in electric-only mode. It doesn't have that capability. That engine is mated to a standard 8-speed automatic transmission and your choice of front-wheel drive or a mechanical all-wheel drive system. If you want electric-only operation and a whole lot more power, then you want this setup. This is the T8 Recharge. Power goes all the way up to 455 horsepower combined, thanks to a more powerful turbocharged engine and a big electric motor on the back axle. If you want to know even more about this plug-in hybrid system, be sure and check out the video on EV Buyer's Guide. Here's how it works in a nutshell. We have a 312 horsepower 2-liter turbo up front, a 143 horsepower motor on the back axle. So at full throttle, 312 is happening up front, 143 is happening in the back. In stickier situations like, say, snow or ice, this vehicle can balance power 50-50 all the way up to nearly 300 horsepower and over 450 pound-feet of torque. So all-wheel drive capability is definitely solid thanks to the design of this plug-in hybrid system. And it is definitely different than we find in the Lexus or the Toyota all-wheel drive setups. We have a 14.9 kilowatt-hour usable battery pack located sort of in the middle of the vehicle, and that will give you about 40 miles of electric range. But most importantly, it will also give you about 30 miles per gallon on the combined cycle. So there's really no penalty for choosing the plug-in hybrid system other than the penalty in your pocketbook. Even if you never charged the plug-in hybrid S60, it would get you better fuel economy than the base 247 horsepower engine with mechanical all-wheel drive. This actually comes in at about the same rating as that front-wheel drive model. If you do want to plug in your S60, and I would recommend that you do, the plug is right up here on the driver's side front quarter panel. It will take about 5 hours to charge the battery to give you 40 miles of electric range. If you want to reduce your operating expenses, that's definitely the way to go, because even though, again, this gets pretty similar fuel economy to the base model with a lot of extra power, you can also shift probably half of your gasoline consumption over to electricity pretty darn easily. And this is the kind of vehicle where you could very easily charge it overnight on just a regular 110-volt outlet. So you wouldn't need to install a separate EV charging station at home if you didn't want to. This should be able to completely fill the battery in about 12 hours at 120 volts. When it comes to front seat comfort, I give these power seats 9 out of 10 points. This model has 4-way adjustable lumbar support and a power extending thigh cushion. I do like the way that the thigh cushion actually kind of curves around and helps hold your legs in place. It makes the driving position feel a little bit more comfortable. We have 2 position memory for both the driver and front passenger, and a manual tilt telescopic steering column, not powered in the S60. That's something that we find in most Volvos. Now, you will find more comfortable and more adjustable seats in something like the Mercedes-Benz C-Class. The new C-Class has some very comfortable front seats. Mainly, I find the seat bottom cushion in the C-Class to be a little bit more cushy, provide a little bit more support on some of those longer journeys. For a vehicle in this category, which is definitely a qualification, legroom is definitely good in the back. 77.5 inches of combined legroom. You'll see with this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, I still have about 3.5 to 4 inches of legroom left. This is one of the few vehicles in this segment where I can put a rear-facing child seat behind myself as a driver, but it is a really tight squeeze. Keep in mind, you do want to keep a bit of room between the seat because in an accident, the front seat can move further rearward. But keep in mind that if you really want a lot of room for child seats, you want to take a look at the S90, because if I scoot over here to the right side, I actually can't even fit my feet under this front seat. It's all the way back in its tracks. Legroom is not the problem. It's really the tight footwell area right there. That's pretty common in this luxury segment. You'll find a hair more legroom in this Volvo than in the Audi, the BMW, or Mercedes, and this is almost exactly the same kind of legroom we find in the much larger Acura TLX. The other thing to know is that we have a pretty pretty big hump because this is where the battery is located in the plug-in hybrid model. There is kind of a little rubbery cover over the section. Not quite clear why that's there. I guess so you could put your feet up there, but that would be kind of weird. We have heated outboard rear seats, USB-C charge ports, and plenty of headroom back here. Even in this middle seat, which is definitely higher off the ground, headroom isn't the issue. It's really just that footwell area. And if I go back over here to the driver's side, put my head back to the headrest, I have just a hair of headroom left. Here's a closer look at that hump between the two footwells. If you don't get the plug-in hybrid model, clearly this is not going to be there. We get a very slim hump. We also get a less bulky center console because that center console is where the batteries are located. Behind the traditional trunk lid, you'll find either 11.6 or 15.1 cubic feet of cargo capacity. No, there are not two different trunks in the S60. It's all about how you measure the cargo space. And that's why there has been a little bit of online confusion about exactly how much cargo room we have in Volvo's smallest sedan. In the United States versus Europe and other markets, cargo room is not measured the same way. And sometimes with European car companies, they will struggle to give Americans a cargo figure because they give us the European one or the American one, etc. And sometimes there's confusion. Bottom line, this cargo area is about the same size as the cargo area that we find in the BMW 3 Series. And when it came to our 24-inch roller bag test, I was able to squeak 4 24-inch roller bags back here. So while it may appear to be a little bit smaller by some measure, in reality, it's about the same size as the BMW's trunk. The rear seats fold in a 60/40 fashion. There's also a ski pass-through in the middle. This is the included dual voltage EVSE. It will charge the vehicle at either 12 amps 120 volts or 16 amps 240 volts. You can actually take this end off, get the 240 volt end there, and then charge your EV a little bit faster. At 16 amps 240, it would be using the same plug as a lot of larger window air conditionings. If we take a look under the load floor, we notice no spare tire under there. That's pretty common in a lot of European vehicles. It was deleted to help save weight, so we just get a can of Fix-A-Flat, tire iron, etc. As we look around the interior, keep in mind this is not the base trim, so obviously there are going to be things in here that you won't find in that base version, but no version of the S60 will have extending sun visors. That's something I wish they would include. These do move from one side to the other, but you can't pull them out to shade a little bit more of the window, especially the side. We have a panoramic moonroof up here, but it's not quite as panoramic as some. You can see that it has a small second panel back there, but it doesn't go anywhere close to the headrests for the rear passengers. The driver and front passenger get height adjustable shoulder belts, but fixed in place headrests. Now, I know that these are a safety feature. Some people will call them head restraints, some people call them headrests, but the reason they're fixed here is because of their safety function. Volvo says that a lot of folks don't properly adjust adjustable headrests, and that's why these are fixed in place. Moving down from there, you can see that we have an interesting blend of upholstery. So this is actually a fabric insert right there, and then we have leather on the outside of that little Swedish flag like we see in other Volvo models. I think this is definitely an attractive seat. And I do kind of like the bolsters being that fabric section because they are a little bit grippier than an all-leather seat would be. As you can see, the bolstering is fairly aggressive, both in the shoulder area, in the thigh or side area there, and then down here for the legs also. But the shoulder area is wide enough that I don't have a problem with this seat design. Here's a better look at that extending thigh cushion so you can see the way that it curves up there towards the end. I definitely like that, but I know a lot of folks were asking about that. Some people might not like it. Moving over to the front doors, we have a decent percentage of soft touch materials. Injection molded, slush molded plastics down there at the bottom, all soft touch right there. Fabric insert right there in the middle of the door. Over here you can see the metal speaker grills and the 2-position seat memory for the front passenger. This particular model has the optional leather stitched dashboard. You can see that the entire upper section of the dashboard and the midsection, those are all made from stitched leather. It's a really elegant look. Down from there we have a metal accent in the dashboard rather than wood. I do prefer the wood trim that we find in most Volvos to the metal trim. And then down here we have a large bin-style glove compartment. I had no problem fitting an 11-inch tablet computer inside. The lower portion of the dashboard is made from sort of a rubbery plastic rather than the soft touch plastics that we find on the doors or the leather upper section of the dashboard. And then we find hard plastics around that glove compartment. That is pretty similar to the German competition. In the middle of the dashboard, we have the very distinctive Bowers & Wilkins center channel speaker. This is something that we've seen in a wide variety of different Volvo models. It continues in here. Again, all that stitch work going on there. In the middle of everything, we find a different infotainment system than this S60 launched with to begin with. So this is no longer running that software package. It still supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but this is now running the Google operating system right here in the dashboard. So if we go over to the mapping interface, this is Google's mapping interface with live mapping data, traffic data, etc. It is definitely a snappy system, much snappier than the first generation system that the S60 shipped with. But there are a few quirks. Some things have never really been adapted to this software. So if, for instance, we were to go over to this option here and then take a look at car status, there's no status for the plug-in hybrid system. So it doesn't tell you where the power is going, what's coming out of the battery, etc. None of that is offered there. We do have the Google Assistant, so you can ask the car to do things like adjust the climate control, all sorts of things like that. You'll definitely notice the snappier nature of the system if you do things like want to access the 360-degree camera setup. That is definitely much faster. But then there are some quirky things, like if you want to adjust the drive mode, you have to press that gear icon, then you go up here to driving, then you can adjust the drive mode right up there. Volvo has removed all the knobs for the drive mode selection, and that's something that I wish they would have kept. I wish they had sort of an adjustment button down here or something like that. We have the same sort of controls that we find in other Volvo models down here. Button for the hazard lights, front defogger, rear defroster, track forward, backward. This is a volume knob, big play pause button right there in the middle. But this over here, which is a glove box open button in some Volvos, is nothing in the S60. Then we have the very distinctive crystal shifter here. This is a really elegant touch. It illuminates at night, which is really darn cool. We find this in the plug-in hybrid models. It's a joystick style shifter. So if I put my foot on the brake, I just pull back for drive, push forward for reverse. Park is that button right there. If I pull back in drive and then pull back again, that takes me over to the B mode, enhanced braking. I can then toggle side to side. The battery is the reason that this console is large, bulky, and square, but it's not shaped like a traditional rear-wheel drive transmission tunnel. If I zoom in here on the driver's side, you'll notice that it doesn't really flare out into the footwells as some rear-wheel drive transmission tunnels can. So the footwell remains a bit squarer, but the console is definitely higher and bulkier than some. Moving back up to the driver's side of things, we find a full-color heads-up display up there on the stitched dashboard, and a full LCD instrument cluster underneath it. But this instrument cluster is actually a little bit less adjustable than the instrument cluster we found in the pre-refresh S60. This is basically the only look you get. You can turn that map on or off, but the center area doesn't really do anything else. The steering wheel has the same round design as other Volvos. We have sport grips up top. It's leather wrapped. You'll find the controls for the adaptive cruise control and the advanced lane centering system over here on this side. Controls for voice command, turn that map on and off, and then track forward, backward, volume up, down over here on this side. This will also work to adjust the heads-up display once you've enabled that with the infotainment system in the middle. Then we have the big Volvo airbag cover right there in the middle. Let's start the drive a little bit out of order so we can talk about the different drive modes. Right now, I'm in pure mode, and the way this vehicle is set up, it will automatically go back to pure mode if the battery is charged and you start the vehicle. That is something that you have the option to select. I can just go here in the driving assistance systems and choose the always start in pure. These different drive modes are important to understanding the way this all-wheel drive system functions. So in pure mode, only rear-wheel drive. Theoretically, in hybrid mode, if the battery was depleted, it's only front-wheel drive out on the open highway, although the system is always going to try and do something back there in the rear. But it could completely disconnect it, operate purely as a front-wheel drive vehicle. Or it can do power mode or constant all-wheel drive modes, which are the two most interesting features with this system. Here's what's going on. In the constant all-wheel drive mode, it starts the gasoline engine. It's needed because it's what powers the front axle. Motor powers the back axle. If I floor it, we get Scrabble on all four wheels because it's going to try and match the output of the rear electric motor to the engine up front until it hits about 300 horsepower, honestly, and at that point it's going to be biased a bit more towards the front. But with over 220 pound-feet of torque in the rear, there is a lot of torque and a lot of capability in this all-wheel drive system. So you'll really notice that going up a slope like this. Now, if I put it in hybrid mode, it's going to be somewhere between worlds. It's going to be focused mainly on efficiency, and it's going to operate in electric-only mode if there's sufficient battery charge, but it's really going to drop the threshold on the accelerator pedal down as to where the gasoline engine will kick in. In pure mode, you can really accelerate onto the highway, drive at highway speeds in electric-only mode, but if you start digging on the throttle deeper, it's going to think you want all the power, it's going to turn on the gasoline engine. And that threshold is higher in pure mode lower in hybrid mode, non-existent in power and constant all-wheel drive. Really, when you're moving, the engine's going to be on in those two modes. Well, we're out on this last section of gravel road. Let's talk about the ride quality. I rate that a solid A-. This is just about as well composed as the average European sedan, and I would say it's above the Acura TLX. This has a fully independent suspension, of course, as you'd expect in a luxury vehicle, but it also has a double wishbone suspension up front, which ensures that the front tires have a more even contact patch on the ground than a McPherson strut setup, which is what we used to find in the S60, but in this generation of Volvo's latest products, they've moved to a more expensive, more elegant front suspension design. If I could add one feature to this vehicle, it would be electronically controlled active dampers. If you want adjustable dampers, they're not electronically controlled, you can get those in the Polestar Engineered package. You actually have to twiddle some knobs on the individual dampers, but you can really fine-tune the damping rate however you like. I like the thought of that, but the actual practice of it I think is just a bit annoying to get out and adjust them. It's not like I could just simply choose, I want a softer ride right now. The other thing to know is that we don't get as much adjustability in the drive modes as we used to. So if I scroll down here, we just have the steering feel firm option, so you can choose firm or not firm steering feel, but it's not going to change the feedback. With that out of the way, let's dive into the performance numbers. Stab the throttle, you'll get a tiny bit of wheel slip, and 0 to 60 in 4 seconds flat. That is definitely very swift. It's almost as fast as a BMW M340i, definitely faster than the Acura or the Audi competition. But the way that Volvo gets 0 to 60 is a little bit different, as I can demonstrate right here around this corner. If I come to a complete stop and floor it, even without getting to 60, you will definitely feel a bit of torque steer because we have a lot of power on the front and we don't have a mechanical connection to the rear. But on the other hand, if we're going and I floor it around this corner, you will get the rear end to step out because this can overpower that rear axle to give it a rear torque bias at certain speeds. And that makes this a really interesting combination of feeling. We also have a near perfect 50-50 weight balance because of the location of the battery packs. This is much better balanced than the regular S60 or something like the Acura TLX Type S, but it is pretty heavy. This model weighs about 4,500 pounds. That makes the 0 to 60 time perhaps even more impressive. The way that Volvo has chosen to tune everything is definitely different than the Germans. We have an awful lot of grip, an awful lot of power, but not as much grip as you'll find in the BMW or the Mercedes competition. This model has just 235 with all-season tires, and it really is noticeable out on a road like this. You will definitely start getting yourself sliding before a BMW or a Mercedes with similar amounts of power. If you get the Polestar Engineered, it does bump up to 245 with tires, but this also has an impact on the 60 to 0 stopping distance. It took this model 120 feet to stop from 60 to 0. That's about 10 to 15 feet longer than the average competitor from Germany, which would have wider, grippier tires on it. But on the other hand, we have fantastic fuel economy. 31 miles per gallon is what this vehicle has been rated for when operating just as a hybrid on my daily commute, which involves going up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass. I was averaging 35 miles per gallon. This is pretty darn efficient and definitely heaps and heaps of fun. When plugging it in, I was able to get 44 miles on a city loop, about 36 miles driving out on 70-mile-an-hour highway. Thanks to the greater capacity of the battery, improved cooling for the battery, and the bigger electric motor in the rear, this is now one of the few plug-in hybrid vehicles that can stay in electric-only mode on my daily commute. It's about 60 miles round trip, charging it on both ends, about 30 miles or so, but both ends involve a 2,200-foot mountain pass, and this is one of the few vehicles that will climb up that hill in full electric-only operation. Interesting twist, even the plug-in hybrid version of the Lexus NX and the RAV4, the RAV4 Prime, those have to turn on the gasoline engine. I think because of some battery overheating issues. Maybe the battery temperature goes up just a little bit too high. Also, Outlander plug-in hybrid, it can't do it either. It can almost squeak it in if you're really treating it gently, but generally speaking, it's going to turn on the engine. This, every day of the week, hasn't needed to turn it on as long as the battery charged full. In my cabin noise testing at 50 miles an hour, this proved to be a little bit quieter than the last S60 we tested, likely due to the tire compound. These are different tires, and this one came in at 71 decibels. So I'm going to go ahead and give this an A- when it comes to cabin noise. The Mercedes C-Class does appear to be a little bit quieter in the cabin. I was also impressed with the road noise control in the BMW 3 Series. One thing to know is that versus some of the competition, the kind of road noises we get in the Volvo cabins tends to be a little bit more road noise focused. Pretty much every Volvo is very well controlled when it comes to wind noise, but the road noise is a little bit elevated versus some of the German competition. But this model definitely appears to be a little bit quieter. Volvo has not said whether they've improved the cabin sound deadening, extra foam, or anything like that, but this definitely proved to be a little bit quieter in my testing. Full disclosure, if you didn't already know this, I have owned 2 Volvos in the past, but it's been about 12 years since I said goodbye to my last Volvo. I definitely like and appreciate the way that Volvo goes about chassis tuning in a different manner to the Germans. This doesn't feel like a BMW copycat, and for me at least, that's refreshing. You either like the way a vehicle drives or you don't, and this is the kind of vehicle that is very easy to live with. It's comfortable, it's relatively quiet, it is awfully swift. Not everybody is going to be a fan of the delay of the hybrid system. So if you do want the ultimate in performance, you should know that passing times and just stoplight to start times are going to be a little bit different in this than a 340. So you have to wait for the power to come up a little bit. You have to wait for the turbo to spool up. It is going to take a little bit longer than the more instant power delivery we find in a C43 or an M340i. But the compensation for that is really high fuel economy, significantly better fuel economy than you'll find in the BMW or the Mercedes, and significantly better performance than you'll find in the plug-in hybrid equivalent in the BMW lineup. There's nothing wrong with the BMW 330e, it's just not this level of bonkers fun, and oddly enough, it's not going to be this level of efficiency either. Clearly, the safety reputation of Volvo is a strong reason to buy this over the competition. It's not that the rest of the competition is unsafe, far from it. Every entry in this segment scores extremely well in North American and European crash tests, but based on Volvo's reputation and their performance in a wide variety of real-world situations, I would probably go for the Volvo if safety was absolutely my top consideration. But you really can't go wrong with the BMW, the Mercedes, the Tesla, etc. Now, on the flip side of that is the fact that Volvo doesn't include as much active safety tech standard on the S60 as you'll find, for instance, in a Lexus or an Acura. Things like adaptive cruise control, the 360-degree camera system, a few other features are optional on the S60, but of course, you'd probably end up in them in the average model on the dealer lot. Style is obviously a subjective thing, but I have to say I like the S60's looks. I think it's a bit more attractive than the current generation C-Class because it's not quite as bubbly. Mercedes has gone really into the jelly bean-like styling for a lot of their vehicles. It's not exactly my preference. I think that the Volvo, the Audi, and the BMW are a little bit more attractive, although the long-toothed grille in the BMW is not everybody's cup of tea. I will say, however, I'm not a big fan of the blacked-out badging that we had on this model. I also like the interior roominess of the S60. You have a decent amount of headroom, decent amount of legroom in the vehicle as well. And this is one of the few plug-in hybrids we have in this segment. If you're not ready to go all-electric, as in a Tesla Model 3 or a BMW i4, this plug-in hybrid system is excellent because it gives you very much an electric driving experience with the one-pedal driving, with a lot of power, decent EV capability, and long range. But of course, you have that ability to get good fuel economy on those longer road trips. And fuel economy is a solid reason to buy this. That's what's really intriguing about the S60 in this competitive set. If we take a look at the BMW, the Mercedes, the Tesla, etc., this is really more in between these worlds than the BMW 3 Series plug-in hybrid, which I think is a good option, but it's not as EV focused, I would say, as the Volvo. In this model year, Volvo has canceled the T6, so you go straight from 247 horsepower, front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, all the way up to 455 horsepower with the plug-in hybrid system that gives you 27 or 28 miles per gallon of real-world range, sometimes 30 out on the open highway, definitely solidly fuel efficient, and 41 miles of all-electric range, all wrapped in 455 horsepower. Performance, it is actually very similar to the BMW M340i and the Mercedes-Benz C43 AMG in my testing, a little bit faster than the Audi S4 on a regular basis, with considerably better fuel economy than those options, and pricing that's right in line. When you take a look at this pricing range sheet, you'll notice that the BMW and the Mercedes definitely get more expensive, but the key thing to know is that their performance, or semi-performance models, because there is a higher performing M3 of course, start a lot more expensive. If you want the plug-in hybrid system on the Volvo, it starts at $51,250. There is a possibility you'd get the $7,500 tax credit on a lease of that Volvo as well, so keep that in mind. A BMW M340i, $58,400, so significantly more expensive. The C43 AMG starts at $59,900. Audi S4, little bit less of a premium there at $52,800 starting, but all those will get more expensive. Now, clearly the Volvo is not the same kind of performance machine as those other options, but it does give us an option in this segment that really hasn't existed up until the S60 came on the scene. Something that is as fast as the German competition. You certainly won't find that in the Lexus lineup, for instance. Even the IS500 definitely leaves some performance on the table versus these options. And it doesn't have the same sort of capability or fuel economy that we find in the Volvo either. But it's not a full EV, so if you are looking for something that will shift some of your consumption across, you could do your daily commute in this in electric only very easily, and then have that EV range, that gasoline range for longer road trips. This is a solid option that you don't find in the Mercedes lineup at all, or in the Audi lineup, because those two car companies are delivering regular gas models and full EVs, and Volvo is really pushing everybody towards this transition process where we don't have a full EV in this segment yet. We will see one from them eventually, but at the moment, they're moving everybody to a mild hybrid, then a plug-in hybrid, and then eventually a full EV. Let me know what you think about that, and what would you choose in this segment? I have to admit I'm pretty torn. If I were looking for performance, traditional performance metrics, handling feel, etc., I would probably get the M340i. I love the way that drives, especially the all-wheel drive model. The rear-wheel drive model is still fun, but all-wheel drive is definitely more my cup of tea. I would get that over the C43. I would certainly get it over the Audi S4. The weight balance in the S4 isn't exactly my thing. But if I were shopping more pragmatically and I wanted that performance level, but I didn't want to spend as much money, and I didn't want to spend that much money on a weekly or monthly basis on fuel, then I would buy the S60, I have to admit. It's $7,000 less expensive, so pretty inexpensive comparatively. If you lease it, you'll get the tax credit, which could widen that gap out to about $14,000. And then the reality is you'll be getting a lot better fuel economy in it than in the BMW on your daily commute, even if you could never charge the vehicle. It would be significantly more expensive to drive the BMW. On balance, everything considered, I would probably lean towards the S60. I like the style, etc., but I like the tech and the performance in the BMW more. So which is better? I would say the BMW is the better performance vehicle especially. On the other hand, even if you weren't interested in a vehicle that had any EV range at all, the S60 makes a solid argument for itself. Solid performance, solid fuel economy in a very attractive package. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And what would you pick if you were shopping in this segment? Would you lean towards a full electric option like the Tesla Model 3? That's definitely going to be a solid choice. Would you go for a reliable option that sounds fantastic but isn't quite the same level of performance? That would be the Lexus IS500. That does have a fantastic sounding engine, and it's the only V8 in this segment. Or would you split the middle and get the very pragmatic, very fuel efficient, and still very, very fast, but in a quirky sort of way, S60 right in the middle? I have to say, if my money were on the line, I would probably lean S60. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below, and stay tuned because hopefully we will be driving some of the other options later this year.